who I know now almost, how long? Almost like 20 years now, since I was in the US. Anyway, Shubham, please do, Radhika, with your permission, can this be recorded, the talk? Because we archive all the guest speaker series, So, yeah. So, Shubham, speaker has given permission, we can
Yes,
record
ma'am.
it. Okay. I did share our guest speaker this evening, her profile with all of you, but it's a proud privilege for me to really introduce once again to all of you Dr. Radhika Iyengar, who is the Director of Education and Research Scholar at the Center for Sustainable Development at Earth Institute, Columbia University. Radhika actually is leading the Education for Sustainable Development initiatives and promotes international development for education as a practitioner, researcher, teacher, and manager. Her research interests consists of conducting evaluations of educational programs and international educational development. In addition to directing education initiatives at the Center for Sustainable Development and conducting field work in over 10 countries, she contributes to the scientific community focusing on international educational development. She's the chair of the Environmental and Sustainability Special Interest Group at the Comparative and International Education Society. Her latest publication, which I recommend all of you to read, it is freely available open access, is titled Education as the Path to a Sustainable Recovery from COVID-19, which has been published by the official journal of UNESCO IBE, which is Prospects. She received the Distinguished Early Career Award from Teachers College, Columbia University for her service to the field of international education development in 2020. She also received a distinction from Teachers College, Columbia University for her PhD dissertation on social capital as a determinant of schooling in rural India, which was a mixed methods study. She also received her master's degree in economics from Delhi School of Economics in India. And those of you who know about the NGO Pratham's work, let me also add this information to all of you. Radhika was very much involved with Pratham's work during the early years when Pratham started working as an NGO, education NGO in India. So she brings with her a lot of experience with regards to international development work, and specifically the role of civil societies and NGOs for over actually 2 decades, more than that. So over to you, Radhika. I'm really, really very, very glad and honored that you accepted my invitation to speak to our students here. And we are really looking forward to learn about your current research.
Thank you so much, Moshmi, and thank you for this honor to have me a part of your class. And it's really been it's an honor to be participating in this class today. And also, thank you for your very kind words. Yes, Moshmi and I know each other for a very, very long time, and she has pioneered many things at the Environmental Sustainability Education SIG, as well as the South Asia Special Interest Group at CIS. And both these platforms have crossed Moshmi and I both. So very honored to be in this group today. So maybe I can share this short presentation, but more so I think this presentation is more for us to get us started, and not really formal presentation. By the way, I really like this title, Thinking Thursdays Research Series, because clearly I think we need a lot of rethinking and thinking about education related work, especially learning from the pandemic. So please feel free to stop me if this is really not a formal lecture. I wanted to go by this title of Thinking Thursdays, and we can have a much more engaged discussion as we go along. In fact, in the presentations itself, I have some questions So we can definitely have those, we can discuss those questions. So just wanted to go with some background. I know I'm supposed to be discussing my work in Melbourne, but the background for that paper was really coming from various sources. So I just wanted to go with what those sources are, and you can tell me the India story, since I was not there in during the pandemic. There will be, I'm sure, a lot of cross. Ideas that are very similar, and we know who gets disrupted and why they get, why the education services are being disrupted for many of these children and youth. So just one of the couple of readings, or it's mostly newspaper articles, that got me thinking about what we should be doing beyond the pandemic and for environmental education for sustainable development, is the marginalized population that gets left behind. So basically, a lot of research showed that many places in America, the widened racial and economic gaps were the reason why education didn't really reach many people. Similar to India, I would assume that in India we will have a lot of villages and lot of migrants going from one place to the other, so it became very difficult for them to access any education. So there are some similarities there that I can see, but please feel free to keep bringing up any other similarities that you like. So I just wanted to start with this widened racial and economic gaps, because we know that education services are very easily disrupted because of these two factors. Either it's the race in the US, or economic related reasons why these children get left behind. Again, there are schools, there are private schools here, public schools here. During this pandemic, we saw that many private schools were able to adapt very quickly, and they did many other things because they had the luxury of doing online education really from the get go. People in the homes had more than one laptops and technology. They were living in areas where we could have greater access of technology. And then, of course, there were many areas and neighborhoods in the US where the public education system was not that strong. So that really widened the education gaps even further, where we were able to see this public private divide. And I think as education people, this is a commonsensical thing, but time and again we keep ourselves getting back into the same idea of how can we equity should be a base for education access and as well as quality education. We know the plight of mothers, and we know what happened during the COVID. Just going back by what are the things that really went wrong. Some mothers said that it worked for me, some mothers really collapsed because there was very difficult issues where they could not access, they had multiple children, or they had problems with the just the content that was delivered on online education. So that became very very hectic and stressful for many families, and that's why this focus on this Friday we have the SEL day, social emotional learning, and that really became a very critical point, where it was not just cognitive education but also SEL related work that was hampering a lot of learning that could take place in the homes. So, what have we learned from the pandemic so far? Education inequalities have grown wider and deeper. Technology became this great divider instead of a unifier. Of course, over time, there has been at least some improvement on how people have accessed the technology. And I'm sure you must have seen this in India as well. I don't know if any of you want to discuss, the technology part. We can definitely do that. Then the learning gaps are increasing, because learning gaps are increasing as a function of race, as a function of where people live, and that's really unfair. Because if we are saying we provide same education to everyone, and that no one should be left behind just because of their where they live, it's really unfair. And in this day and age, I think those criteria should really be removed. And then more youth, especially girls, will probably never return to school because they would have gone to work or they are looking after the younger siblings. That's more of an international area. I think the Malala Fund was able to do a lot of research on girls dropping out. And then more youth are unemployed right now because the growth rates have decreased. There's been an economic slowdown in many countries, and so there are many students who are graduating or have graduated, but there is a mass unemployment, which is a cause of lot of troubles in terms of education. So what have we learned so far? That there are gaps in the curriculum. In terms of the access to education, we have seen that there are a lot of gaps in the curriculum. We never really focused on environmental education, we never really focused on health education. And then in terms of environmental education, we all have to remember that we are in this pandemic because of loss of biodiversity. So have we how do we incorporate this environmental education or education for sustainable development into our curriculum really is something that we really need to look at. And then kids have learned many things at home, they have learned many things at home, but how do we bring this learning to school, and how can we actually ensure that the learning continues, or there is a continuum and school education is not different from what they learned at home. And then also we can learn many things from our own communities, and that's linked to the paper that I worked on in Melbourne, which is basically bringing the communities up front, making sure that communities are able to bring in the education element. So those aspects of community based learning, I think, needs to be again revisited and has been neglected, and there's this divide between community based learning and school. I think that divide really needs to go away now, especially after the pandemic. Then there's this all this unexplored potential of technology. We know that there's been many platforms that have been opened up, connecting people, connecting tutors, at least in the US setting. So I think that's a big potential of technology that can help to unify rather than divide in the service provision. And then this old style of education, which is this banking style of education, that knowledge flows from teachers to student, is completely outdated. We have seen that many students have learned on their own, and so how can that translate into school-based education? I think that's something we can definitely learn from in going forward. And then children's mental well-being, as I mentioned, the social emotional aspect has not been focused on in terms of pedagogy, in terms of like consciously bringing in that aspect in the classrooms. That's something that we need to learn from. So just know, so basically discussing now, what should kids learn going forward. What should we learn from these kids? I don't know if you have any suggestions or ideas before we go forward.
Come on, don't feel shy. This is this is informally like we ask you in the classroom.
Uh,
Any ideas, anything that you think kids should learn?
hello. My name is
Yes,
Anshul Agarwal.
yes, Sandal. Could you please speak a little louder?
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible, but it's your voice is coming very soft, Sandal.
Um, just a question related to this, like what should kids learn? So, is it like from the pandemic, or is it general in schools, or is it?
Yeah, so good question, Sandal. So it's basically I'm asking, after the pandemic, as I mentioned, that maybe kids should learn about health education. We have not focused on environmental education so far. But any other ideas on what should they learn, given that they have spent more than a year or at least a year at home?
Hmm.
Any ideas on what they should be learning going forward, or do you think that there were things that they missed out earlier on, need to be now integrated into school education, or anything that you have thought of in terms of the content of students learning? Just want to get some general ideas.
Go ahead. I
If
think
I may,
Prerna.
Yes, ma'am.
Sandal, Prerna, and then Tatiana, I can see. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. So I would like to give an answer based on the you know the things which I seen in my home. Like there are at least 10 kids which are they have belong to various classes, and what I have seen that they were given the rote learning process all the time, even during the pandemic.
Hmm.
They were just given to copy. I mean, they were given the answers through WhatsApp of every activities, and they were asked to copy those activities, or maybe copy those question and answers into the copies where parents are asked to check on behalf of the teachers. So I don't think so. Uh, Students are actually learning. So maybe this is the process even when they are in school pre-pandemic, and even this is happening during pandemic. And if we talk about post pandemic, I mean, students will get to have an habit if these things continue, because they are not creatively learning anything. They are just learning what it's in the book. It's like the acquisition of the knowledge, not just like on in the sense of learning, like what they are going to do with this knowledge. A 10th standard student coming up with me, asking, please, can you please shorten this answer, because I'm unable to learn the whole answers. So that's kind of a rot learning, even like in general I'm talking about. So I'm these things should be given some priorities, not through the student level, not at the student level, but at also at the teachers level, and of course at the higher level, like the school level.
Thank
Yes.
you, Sandal. Thank you. There is a comment in the interesting comment in the chat from Sneha. Sneha is saying that it would be good for kids to learn basic survival skills, cooking, say for example, cooking, gardening.
Right. That is so true. And thank you, Sandal, for bringing those important points up. Even before the pandemic, we knew this was there, but now it became an obvious thing for the parents also to see how the classes are being run and what they are learning. So I think this challenge or this idea of, just regurgitating what you have memorized is coming out in front of, the parents. Also, I've realized that. In the private schools also, this habit of memorizing and tests and parents doing the kids homework in many cases, because the kids have to shine in the class somehow. The projects, class projects, have become this, parental projects, where the mothers are so busy writing and doing all these projects for the kids. I don't know what the kids would be doing, but of course if the child is doing the homework, um, her or his project will be not regarded as the best one, because we have to upkeep with the notion that the child has done this marvelous project. I think these are all these things that, and in between, what are we learning? So as the comment in the chat box says, yes, because I realize that even with my kids at home, when I am doing like a baking project or maybe making a roti, there are so many math skills involved. And so can the children know how to make their own bed? Can the children know how to make like a, lay the table? These skills, I think, have not been integrated into life skills, have not been integrated into the curriculum. So you guys have really brought out some things that I feel very strongly about, and thanks for bringing those points up. I don't know if there is any other
There
person
were
who.
two
I
more.
yeah.
Prerna. Prerna, go ahead.
So I also want to give an example of my cousin. She's in the 10th grade right now. So my bua's daughter. And so they're having boards. Last year they did not have boards, the 10th grade. So she was in hope throughout the pandemic that probably for them also there won't be any offline boards or offline tests. So, the preparation was in such a way that my bua, she was helping my cousin throughout her exams. And now for her pre-boards, she's actually sitting in physical exams and she's so stressed that she does not know what to do. She's missing everything. Now suddenly everything is offline. So I feel that this pandemic also did teach us something, that we need to be prepared for everything. So one good thing which has happened with the pandemic is that the students have become tech savvy, which was something which was not there when I was a kid. Probably I was more into the practical understanding of things, like say the life skills which you're talking about. I was in a convent school, so I was taught how to lay a table, how to sit on the table, the proper table manners, everything. So yes, that is also important, but again, we do need to teach the kids how to probably evolve from, say, the offline to the online sessions as well.
Mhm. Yes, so yes, so there has been some positives with in terms of technology, but technology can go both ways. That's a very good point that we learned all these skills, and those skills are now somehow lost. So I think that's a great segue to thinking about other things, which couple of people here have focused on, which is basically this pandemic has shown the best and the worst of humanity. So I feel that one of my professors, Monisha Bajaj, now at the University of San Francisco, she is basically focusing on, what type of schooling do we really need in terms of acts of resistance, or what should colored parents like me, I'm a brown parent here, what should we be teaching our kids, and how can we make those kids much more connected with a lot of other freedom movements or acts of resistance that has happened before. So something on that which has just been again out of our realm. Another thing that I feel is very important is the lessons of inequity and social justice, which we have not really been focusing on. So here race is a big issue, and my kids are young, and so I feel that how should we broach this topic, should we broach this topic or not? Those are things that we need to be really focusing on in terms of bringing equity, bringing social justice as a part of the curriculum, because we are very much concerned about exams and how well my daughter or son will be doing, but what about us as a society? We have seen so many injustices during this time. I was just reading New York Times this Sunday, and I saw this fact which was so startling that 60% of Myanmar, which is again right now facing this coup, has um, is living below, is earning $1.60 per day. Imagine that. And so I feel that what are we doing as a society to help countries who are struggling right now? What are we doing as a society to think about others and not just about yourself? And this self idea of like, yes, I'm going to go ahead and do all of this amazing things, and I'm just going to be a superstar, whereas I don't care about what the others are facing and doing. I think that part, especially during the pandemic, has become much more evident and has become much more in your face. So those aspects, if we are not teaching now, especially after the pandemic, I think these are big lessons that we would have lost from learning from the pandemic. And of course, you can tell me about these curriculums a little bit more if you have seen social justice issues coming up. I think that's something we can definitely discuss. Mashmi, you have a big
Yeah,
one.
there are a couple of more comments from two students.
Yes,
Radhika, I wanted to share with you,
yes.
and I think you would like to hear what they have to say. Sahil is saying that learning must be from surrounding and by doing, and something they can connect with, and in a this is important. I think this is interesting aspect he has highlighted, in a language that they feel comfortable with. And he's saying, rather than covering up, trying to finish up with the syllabus in the upcoming year, if we can just focus on this aspect, you know because once again, within, particularly within the Indian context, even in a regular year prior to the pandemic, the focus is so much on just covering the syllabus, completing the very little focus on whether how much the student is actually learning or not. So I think, and also the language issue, which somehow I think connects with the US context, I think also for, for children who come from non-mainstream background, immigrant background in the US, right?
Right. So I think, Sahil, I think you just brought out these two very, very important aspects which are linked to the slide that I have shown. Learning by doing is something that we really, this environmental education focus, the reading that you read for this presentation, I think um really speaks to this issue that our education is so disconnected with our real lives that there is no connection between what you are living in your house, how you are living, and what are your aspects that you're dealing with here versus school based education. You're reading some about something else and your life is going somewhere else. So how can we connect? For example, this plastic ordinance, we recently in Melbourne, I live in New Jersey in a small town called Melbourne. We have around 20,000 households. And we really focused on this, environment related work where the township banned single use plastic. And so now imagine that if we are not discussing this in the schools, it is really the town is going in a different direction, policies are going in a different direction. But we are not getting, we are not focusing on these issues and focusing on some other, generic environmental education in the school. So that's really not, or will say that, oh, ice in the polar region is melting. It is melting, but what are the things that we can do locally, I think is so important to discuss, because otherwise the students will be like, okay, what can we do? Ice in the polar region is melting, but I think we need to really focus on action plus the knowledge, translate that knowledge into local action. So really, you are bang on in terms of the lived experiences. And then, yeah, covering the syllabus, yes, I can imagine as a professor, I also am so concerned about covering the syllabus, but at the same time I feel that there are ways of covering the syllabus but making education relevant, making sure that you are not forgetting the larger idea about education. Why are we educating these children, or can these children now educate us? Because doing a lot of environmental work, I feel that children in middle school are creating curriculum for grade 3 students. So in a way teachers are becoming, I feel that there should be much more collaboration between these peer-to-peer learning styles, or much more, getting the other kids involved. So it's not just a teacher trying to cover the syllabus, but many other aspects that we are, looking at. So I think we are all agreeing on these basic principles. I'm just trying to give some examples here so that we can really focus on trying to get examples from India and the US. But happy to get all your ideas, since I think the education community knows where we want to go, but we have really never achieved that goal, which is very frustrating for me, because now the pandemic has happened and there are so many things that we have learned, but can we translate all of these ideas into action? And one way of doing this, I want to deter a little bit and stop sharing my screen. I want to go here, which I was not intending to go, but I think the discussion is such that I need to take you to this website, and I really need your help here. I'll tell you how. What here, so I'll share this link in our chat. um, wow, so many comments. I'll get onto those comments very quickly, but I just wanted to share this slide, share this work here. So eco ambassadors is the program that you have read in the work, in the paper that I published. In mission 4.7, which is all SDG related, I want content contributors. So what do we really need to do here is read sustainable development goals. We have this book, Jeffrey Sachs's book, which I feel is like a really good book that covers sustainable development. Happy to read other books, and we can post it here as well. For now I just have this. There's an online course here which Professor Sachs does on H for sustainable development. I want you all to watch this, take this course. It's a Udemy course. It's a free course on integrating sustainable development goals across curriculum and education spaces. And that's where we want to give those lived examples and all the things that you guys are suggesting. Can we integrate all of that, those examples examples on with sustainable development goals. You can get some more ideas from this video here, and then submit lessons online. We are all teachers, so I feel that you can definitely submit your lesson plan by your name, see where things, how can you integrate sustainable development goals, which is exactly what you're saying, lived examples, connecting to environment, connecting to lifestyles and life skills, and submit your lesson plans in this portal. I would love to share your examples with the rest of the community here. So that's something I just wanted to bring up, because I feel that we are all discussing these ideas, and then again, all these wonderful ideas will go away without us having a much more systematic platform. So that's a platform that we can, all engage in and take, take ownership on. Of course, we will have all your names and things listed. Any other
Thank you.
comment?
Thank you for sharing that, Radhika. I'll definitely encourage students to share their ideas over on the site. But there are a few more comments
Yes.
I wanted to read out to you. One is coming from Ronald, and he's saying that students are playful, so bringing out the objective of learning among kids through different activities and through the activities that allow kids, to develop independent thinking. That is something is going to be more useful, according to him. And Sandal is saying something also is very important, expressing feelings and thoughts, and which is usually ignored in general. And she's saying that as we have gone through the pandemic, schools and parents together should have a practical session where they are taught from both ways to understand the kids' mental well-being. This is, I think, it's a very important aspect. We know the importance of it even prior to the pandemic, and particularly in a country context like India, where the stress to perform well in school is so high on students, and the impact it has on mental health and well-being.
Right. And I think along with that, so very important point, Sandal. I think I completely agree, as Moshmi is saying, that we need to really um, have a space for expressing feelings, which we have not done so far. So this pandemic has taught us this social emotional learning really takes center stage, because we have seen so many children getting depressed by just looking at the computer screen all this time. And when they go to the class, or when they go do some hybrid work where they are going to school for 2 hours, the teacher is continuing with to do some cognitive related work, whereas the student's mind is just not there, because they have, there's so many tensions. People have seen deaths here. More than 500,000 people have died in the US. There's so many troubled things. People have lost their jobs everywhere. So I think those thoughts are going on in the student's mind, and what are they going to learn? So I was listening to Pratham's one of their workshops online. Again, the beauty about online workshops is that you can do this, and there I think they were mentioning, the entire panel all agreed that we should just give them a big hug and have like smiling faces when their kids are back in school, because if we are not the ones who are going to make them feel welcome, then what is the point in having any kind of education? So that's the first step, to give them that warm hug and a smiling face when they return. Ronald brings up this very important point of students are playful. I agree. Maybe here is something that I don't know whether we have, or at least I am not very familiar with. We know we do very well with early childhood education programs with playful methods, but somehow that playway method gets lost somewhere when we go from grade one onwards. So why does that get lost? Because children definitely like to run around and they miss their playgrounds. And at least here I see that those playgrounds were a place where there lot of exchanges of, oh, I read this book and what about that, and I and some struggles and other things keep coming out. So how can that be integrated into curriculums? I'm not very familiar with that pedagogy. I don't know how it is done. Maybe you can share some resources with us, Ronald. Maybe I can get myself educated on how do we continue that playful methods going on. I really love this idea of independent thinking, because when I was in school, I don't think I was an independent thinker. uh, I was so dependent on a teacher explaining all these things, and I knew that because there was no time, right? We all know how the education system works. We have to memorize everything and then go by what the script is, and then that's the how we perform and do the test. But I think I just wish that I had that independent thinking ability since the beginning. I still feel that I can develop that aspect, quite a bit in terms of thinking independently. And now with the eco ambassadors program and with other things, now as I was saying, middle school children are developing a curriculum for their grade 3 friends. I see that, and then I know of these amazing teachers who are developing this sense of inquiry. It's more of a research. So they are doing research when they are in grade 3, because they are thinking independently and they want to explore ideas. And this whole idea of knowledge coming from one textbook and one teacher is so outdated, because now children are going everywhere. Like, they are making their own movie clips, they are editing online, they are using so many things. At least here I see that they are on their own path, based on their learning styles and based on their learning abilities. So this idea of doing research, focusing on one topic but getting answers from interviewing people, or various non-linear ways of learning, I think is something that we it's so important going forward. And again, all these ideas, we know it's not like the pandemic has just completely has given us all these things, but I think the challenges of education became very obvious to everyone. It was not just the teacher or the principal who was saying that, oh, we need to have something else. Now as parents and as community members, we all know about this. So I think that's something that you guys have. So keep thinking and keep sharing all these ideas, because I think it helps me to think about what I can do with my education work here. Great. So should I go on with my
Yes, yes, please go on.
Great.
Go ahead.
Great. So some things that I have been thinking of, and again, as reflected in the Melbourne study that I did, is this idea that community needs have to be every community needs to have an educational hub or a base in for education. Um Here, what has happened is very interesting to know. I didn't really have a like community library in where I grew up in Bhopal. But here, what I realize is that the library, when it shut down, my children would be like, "Oh my God, what do I read? What do I read?" It was such an integral part of our life. I didn't really imagine that a community library will be so important, because they'll read all trashy books. It's not like they will read some sensible books. They will read fictional things. But the library is a very central point to education, which I think in our communities in India, if we can have that community library, or even if one of you become like the library teacher for a community, I think it's just that book exchange and things, and people will donate books. So something, something to continue education, which is not just school, I think is really important. And then large scale technical and vocational training programs, I feel that this green skilling or environmental education is so central. I hope you also feel the same way, because we really need to think about our planet, and we can really make the skills like foundational learning skills also aligned to the green agenda. So somewhere this mix between foundational learning skills and the green agenda, making our planet green, environmental education needs to be included. And I think all the other support, social emotional support also could be there. So what are the mechanisms of doing this? I mentioned the library program, but any other ideas from anyone? How should we do this new education? What are the mechanisms, and how do we continue this work going forward? Any ideas from you all?
Radhika, excuse me, the concept of community library that you said, it really reminds me, and I don't know, probably it's also region space specific, maybe. We did have this community library kind of thing also in Calcutta, where I grew up. In fact, it's still in Bengali, it's called Jonokollan Library. In fact, it used to be the landmark. If people would ask for the address of our house, we will, "Oh, you see Jonokollan Library, the gate, and then you turn left, you come to our house." Okay, so it used to be a very integral part of that community, and not just in the locality where I grew up in the northern part of Calcutta, but there have been, the similar kind of community library, even the area where I have my maternal home. But I find, like, over the years, somehow this with digitization and all these other, when we were little, compared to, we used to get all kinds of, little magazines, storybooks and all these things. It was it's still, now the library is still there, but it's not as of, the readership is not as thriving, because young people are now more, in the digital space,
Nice.
with handheld mobile devices and all. But it has gone in a completely different direction altogether. So it's generally mostly older people I find in the library, and also, older retired people. So retired elderly people, it has become like a place for them to congregate, and have, like, what we say in local language, adda, chit chat, and but not just casual one, but it could be also connected to books that they are reading and all these things. But the younger population, somehow I don't see them around the community library at all. In Calcutta. I don't know about other places though, and Delhi NCR also, I haven't come across any community library in that sense. Maybe it was very typical of, uh, the northern and central part of Calcutta that I'm talking about.
I see. That is interesting. So I'm very sad to know, Moshmi, that that idea of that community space getting together. I feel that Senthil is mentioning that there was this online trend of, like, books, exchange of books. This online, doing everything online, I feel that it's good, but I feel that that personal connection, when you are sitting there with that other person discussing books, you are also asking how are you doing, and is there anything that I can do for you, especially during the time of the pandemic. I think is something is missing. And then when we go to school, it's all just I, me, and myself. I'm coming here to
Mm.
read, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go back. And that's how our society has become. So then we don't care about social injustice issues, we don't care about someone else's need. So it's all connected. And how can we as educators bring in those community spaces again, revive them? Just to give you one simple example, our library was closed. So what we started doing here was, with just 5 or 6 kids, a couple of mothers combined together and just started rotating, library books. We obviously couldn't, and then we could have a socially distance, saying hello and how are you and exchanging books. So I think those library books just became like a, reason for us to continue our discussions and having, okay, have you read this book, or this is my favorite book, and you return back and make sure you return it in good condition, and all sorts of things were being we were discussing. So I feel that some ways of bringing those community aspects, I felt that the community library could be interesting. And Moshmi, I think your example has just made me again reflect that this is really important, this community library format. But any other student who would want to share their ideas on what are the
Tatiana wants to say
Yeah,
something. Go ahead, Tatiana.
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Radhika. It has been really illuminating, and I have enjoyed our conversation just immensely. I would like to add, because we ended up with the mechanisms now, right? This is the
yes.
question. And I was thinking about the value education. So the focus should also be placed on the teacher's education. So first of all, the teachers should be sensitized, and this knowledge about environmental issues should also be first imparted to them. Some starting
Mm.
with the basic issues, how we deal with plastics. So all these collective efforts, each of us being on his or her position should make our humble contribution to the larger goals, right? So
Mm.
this value education, so since we are talking about the transformations, especially after the pandemic, transformations in terms of what kind of knowledge we are imparting, we are sharing with our children, with our students, right? So that means there should be also the some paradigm shifts in terms of teachers education as well. They should be absolutely well versed in terms of how we are going forward, because it is common knowledge, there is no denial that we are in the edge of some catastrophe. Actually, catastrophe has already happened,
Right.
and there is no guarantee that it will not happen again despite
True.
all our efforts, right? So yeah, that's what I wanted to mention. The focus should also be placed on teachers education and how they go about their teaching and learning experiences.
Right.
Thank you for sharing that, Tatiana. And as you were saying, it also brought this thing into my mind, connected to Radhika, what you were saying about banning single-use plastic. Now, you see, there has been similar kind of bans off and on, also in India, almost in every city and town of India. For a few days, suddenly they start giving things in brown bags or, bags made of cloth. And then again, these single use plastics, somehow they come back in circulation. And also the big thing in the Indian context, I think it's very relevant, is which is directly connected to issue of environment and climate change and all these things, is
Mm.
garbage segregation. It was a huge reverse culture shock for me, and difficulty to adjust back to the way the garbage is disposed over here. I
Mm.
still do continue to do the segregation in my own home, but I see the people who come to collect it, they again mix it up. So my
Right.
individual effort in continuing to do something I got used to doing for over a decade, back in the US and Australia, it's somehow, so I'm not a person who can be, I don't have the skills of I should confess, of a community activist or somebody who can really steer the entire community to do things. Unfortunately, I don't have those skills, but I think it's somehow, if through education, the system of education, in which involving also, as Tatiana mentioned, the teachers, if we can create these mechanisms so that there is a it's not just one person individually trying to do, there needs to be more broad based mass awareness of these things, so that it becomes a second habit,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know
Right. So I think, Moshmi, you are. I don't. There's no simple answer to both your observation and Tatiana's observation. I feel that yes, teacher training is an important, but I see teachers as, of course, it is they are vital to all of their work. Going forward, I see them as like one component. I don't see them as such a central component, which maybe I am wrong, because I am a very community person, and I am that community mobilizer, and I am that person who brings in the entire community. And luckily we have many others like me in our community. So I feel that this, how much can we rely on that one teacher to do our education? Because when we send our children to school, she is doing what she can given her perspectives, given her training and other things, and we know those trainings are never sufficient. But what can the communities do to help support the teachers? And do not just, PTOs are just being given the charge of fundraising. Why should we just be doing fundraising? Why can't we be involved in the curriculum and the co-teaching and other things? I think schools need to give some space for communities to do that along with the teachers, so that the teachers can help to, they can really, because here it's so crazy. Some days they'll say okay, we'll do hybrid, some days they'll say okay, no, now only online. How much the teacher can adapt? She's already doing so much. And so I feel that the teachers need some more community support, not just doing fundraising and giving money to the school district. That's all okay, but can we also provide support in terms of all the other things that Moshmi is mentioning: waste segregation, recycling? So here in the US, I'm very embarrassed to say that we have this use and throw culture. We don't care about we know recyclable things, and I think it's not in the culture itself to speak about culture. So we did this recycling campaign where another parent, we made these kids made these posters, and we went class to class. And so I think all the teachers appreciated that also, because at least there is someone else who's coming there. And when the teachers and the parents are reinforcing the same idea of what are the four numbers here, plastic is all numbered, so we know which numbers go into the recycling bin in our homes. Now the children are know which numbers, and they can tell their moms or their fathers that okay, this number
Right.
goes for the recycling bin. But it requires parent initiative, it requires student initiative, because we were not just two parents going and doing this as a part of our green team initiative. There were also 10 other children who had made these posters and were discussing all of these. So in terms of teacher empowerment, communities need to empower the teachers rather than the regular teacher trainings, because I feel that or again, see, maybe I'm wrong, but the teacher trainings have not resulted in it has resulted in curriculum completion, it has resulted in teachers doing their best they can, but the needs are so much that they require the communities to participate also. And how do you change the culture, how do you change, and some ideas and then children are very receptive. They, once you sow the seed, it becomes like, that's their mission to focus on. So I feel that those community aspects need to be included somehow to support the teachers and changing the bad culture that we live in, and make education more environment friendly and inclusive. um, but yeah, those are some ideas. I just want to go over a few things before we take up more questions, because I think the question, I want you to ask me questions on this so that it helps me to think about other issues as well. One is this idea, this one of our one professor, Susan Dynasty, she presented this idea. Again, the idea is that teachers are doing their best. Can volunteers who are retirees be a part of the tutors, become tutors, and can the government pay them? And because there are so many retirees and there are so many mothers who are already teaching their kids, maybe they could have taught, couple of more. So I thought that that was a really strong idea that we have not really picked up on, communities and retirees, and how can they become a part of the tutors. And it can be like a summer tutorial program or something. So that's something that we can really focus on. Um, so this whole idea of the my paper in Melbourne on environmental education actually came from Bob Arnoff, who is a fantastic professor, I think, in Indiana University. And again, I think this article is also free. So I'll send this presentation over, Moshmi, just in case if
Yes.
students want to refer to. And again, as you're seeing, it's just ideas. I haven't really done the whole, my paper, but I just wanted to give you this background. I hope this has been better than just discussing one paper, which is in one direction. So anyway, so I thought that Bob Arnold's article on imagining what education can be post COVID-19. He is discussing all these community learning centers and not really. He just called, like, in India we have all these panchayats and education councils and other things. So I'm thinking that those can be a place where we can have community learning centers, mandirs, masjids, all these places that we have in India. Could be those community learning centers to reactivate the education. And it can just be like elder kids or mothers reading stories, storybooks to kids. That culture is not there. I think that if we can bring in that culture of having community education, community based, and helping the teachers rather than putting all the blame that you have not done this, or children don't, my children don't know how to read well. you as a community should take up that initiative, not just wait for the government to sort out all the problems in this world. So
I
that's
have a
something.
question here for for you, Radhika.
Yes.
Now, I can understand in the US context, what you're saying is very relevant.
Mhm.
But in the Indian context, in larger Indian context, as you know quite well from your work with organizations like Pratham, who primarily work with first generation learners, how can you, where the parents themselves are not educated, they're not literate, forget about education, they're not even literate, how can then, this model be used in the Indian context? Because the parents in the community, they are not themselves empowered to take on that responsibility
Right,
in that
very.
sense. In fact, this is one of the problem, and I'm sure you know about those studies. There have been a lot of studies on the kind of teaching and learning that happens in low fee private schools in India, and there is this misconception that they do much better than the government schools, whereas the evidence from these studies is telling us there isn't much difference, except for the parents, and these are all illiterate parents who have never gone to school themselves. They just see that there is unlike in the government school, there's a teacher visible there, and maybe they hear a few words of English spoken, but whether the content that is being delivered, whether they just can't assess that. And there is hardly much difference between the government schools and these low fee private schools, according to the research evidence. So that's why I want to ask you, Radhika, how do you think what you're proposing can actually play out in the Indian context?
So very good question, Mashmi, and very good question from Sandal as well, because she's saying that are we assuming that schools are failing to do their part? I think we are assuming that every entity needs help, and can the communities need help? Because given that education is in a mess right now, government or private, we need to do our own best in terms of communities and in terms of individual support. And again, this is coming from a, I am a community organizer in the US. I am also has I have been working through Pratham when I was there as a community library person in Trans Yamuna in the regions Trilokpuri and other places. So I feel that in every community you will find at least a college graduate. Even in rural areas you will find a couple of college graduates who will not mind to take up their own community children to read one or two stories. And I've seen that on my own. Like, I think I've worked with villages where we discuss, okay, this is the problem, children are not able to read and write, and can we, so what is the solution? So the solution from them could be, oh, this person knows, he's a graduate from 12, like he's a 12th school class graduate, and can we, so he can teach, at least make the children do homework. So yes, in many places we don't have the luxury of Melbourne, which is such a fancy town in New Jersey, and we have everyone literate, not even just literate, they're experts in their areas. One is a corporate lawyer, the other one is like doing something amazing. So we have all these local experts. But I think the problem is the same in both these locations, is that we are unable to identify those individuals who can make a difference. They decide to go to work with the health ministry, they decide to go to the schools, and they do this work there. In the US there is this, they go to schools and figure out what they need to do. That 1 year of social service, I don't think it is social service. It's not like helping others. I think it is helping yourself, because you get to know the real issues and you get to know. We don't have that culture in India. We have
There
after.
used to be, sorry for interrupting here, Radhika, because I know somebody who was part of NSS,
Hmm.
National Social Service. They used to be, I don't know how, where it stands now. He's a good friend of mine. He was part of this NSS. That was back in 1980s, actually. I'm talking, and thereafter, actually, he started his own NGO, which is one of the largest NGOs based in Calcutta, Organization for Friends, Resources and Energy. Um, So they do a lot of work with children. Actually, initially they started teaching children, abandoned children and street children, and they have been also now doing a lot of work with trafficked children, HIV/AIDS affected children. It's a really big NGO now. It's been there over 3 decades now. But I don't know what happened to the NSS program. I think with changes of government and all these things, this was very much something, during the era of former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. This National Social Service thing. And of course, India had a very different model at the time, in terms of the growth and priority and everything, post independence era. I don't know what happened to that NSS. I haven't done any research myself, but I know one person personally very well who was very much inspired by his work with NSS. And I think thereafter he also volunteered. UN has a volunteer program. He also, after serving for NSS, he also volunteered. And then he has been, since then, completely dedicated to this NGO work for over
That's
3 decades.
I feel that at least 1 year we should take out to see what, because that can shape our thinking going forward rather than just having bookish knowledge. Because as it is, we don't have many live projects that we go and talk to NGOs, work, get the data, work on things through our course. And I hope things have changed now. I didn't get that opportunity. But I think this 1 year of getting to know, like there's this Peace Corps in the US, they go to various different countries to focus on various different issues. I think there's also all these different opportunities. Teach for India, if you're interested in teaching after. So it just helps us to reflect. So those opportunities I think are missing, and can we get those opportunities back, so that we can not just focus on, we know what the real issues are on the ground, and also help us to shape our going forward, help us shape our thinking in terms of where we want to go. So that's something I think. I just wanted to share this example here again, this eco ambassador program that we had. So here, there's a science training and eco advocacy and sustainable, focusing on sustainable development programs. And we would have all these, past projects and training programs and this, that. So I just want to show you that because we got the community involved. There is this person, this one of our eco ambassadors, Alok Bhatt. He was able to do all this workshops on things. There's one of our another student went and collected all these water samples from various different counties in New Jersey. Then there are all these green workshops that we did, and it is not just there's a teacher. This is a student workshop presentation shared by another school district. So we were able to do all this online, because when we couldn't do anything much, it was just 4 o'clock in the evening, there was nothing to do. We would just all be at home. So we would get someone who's a poet in our town, and she would talk about poetry skills, and we would relate it to green skills. Then there would be like a public speaker who they are all again high, like they will not consider themselves as like experts, or they will not consider themselves as like teachers, but getting those people into the education area and learning from them, I got to learn a lot of skills through these community, I would call them experts. So I don't think we should wait for national level things to percolate down to the local level. Let's bring our own grounds up initiative into schools, into everywhere, and that's what we need, at least for green education and for environmental education, I would suggest. But I think all of us, Moshmi, every other than you and me, everyone is quiet. So I want to know what's happening. Are there questions coming in, or does anyone have any
Are
comment?
you done with the what you wanted to share, Radhika?
I think pretty much we can. Oh, so just one last slide. I think is very important. Just wanted to share this slide. You can look up all these other things. I just wanted to share this slide on SDG 4.7, which is this. What is SDG 4.7? Is to ensure all learners acquire knowledge skills needed to promote sustainable development through sustainable lifestyles, education for sustainable development, human rights, gender equality, peace, education, global citizenship. I think this is just something we cannot neglect anymore by saying that, oh, we can't do this, is this too much, this, that. This should be what we should be aiming for. And the UN has given us a very nice framework for this. And I feel that, this should be like our goal objective going forward, all educators. And we want to really focus on not just educating for sustainable education for sustainable development, but making sure that it is enacted in our communities. Otherwise we will, or individuals will, have all this fantastic science knowledge, but if it's not helping our societies to improve, to think differently and to improve as a community, will not really help. And as one of our my director Jeff Sachs says, we are interconnected cultures and interconnected nations. We are human beings interconnected with our physical earth system. So let's try to appreciate the earth system and respect it. Otherwise, we are seeing what mess we are in. It will not go away, as Tatiana was also saying. It will come back again. And then Pope Francis also has similar things to say. Formal public education must endeavor to inculcate in children, youth, humane sensibilities, empathy, and perspective taking communications and collaboration skills, higher order cognitive skills, and to become lifelong learners and civic agents. I think it's so important, because if we are not those civic agents, and if we are not taking this ownership to have that, empathy angle, perspective taking angle, I think it is not going to, we will come back with another pandemic situation very soon.
Mhm.
But those are my last words. I don't know if there are any other
Thank
questions.
you. Thank you so much, Radhika. There's so much to think about based on what you just shared. And there is no doubt about the fact community initiatives are always very, very helpful. Sahil is here in this room, and Sahil has been doing some field, actually he got caught up in his field work site because the pandemic last year during this time, and he came up with a very interesting finding from his fieldwork site, which Sahil, would you like to share it yourself rather than me sharing it? Teacher absenteeism is such a major problem, as you know, within the larger Indian context, and how the students, Sahil, you want to share that story with regards to, community ownership, how it was helpful to even hold the teachers accountable,
Yeah,
which
yes,
we have
ma'am.
written about.
Definitely, ma'am.
Yeah, don't
So
mention the name of the school or organization, but I hope you know how to share the story now without uh, giving out, individual specifics to individuals and organizations. Go ahead.
yes, ma'am. So I'd been involved with few ashram schools, ma'am. So these are residential schools working with tribal students. So ma'am, so to function the schools efficiently, the strength must be 100 students per school. So, I mean, ma'am, in few places, ma'am, I saw that when the strength, because the class was from 5 to 7, ma'am, they're taking care of middle school. So how, I mean, the community was coming together because they had to maintain that 100 strength. So whenever they felt that the students being promoted to different schools, so the strength would go down. So they tried to go to nearby villages and request the parents to send their students in their village so that the school would function efficiently. So this was one example where I saw. Then there's another one where, I mean, ma'am, gender is a big concern there because, ma'am, the girls were looked down and mostly the boys were sent to school. So in this school, ma'am, there are two girls who were, I mean, it was completely opposite from all the observation. So here, ma'am, two girls were there in compared like to a strength of 118 students, two girls who were taking care of the entire school. They were in class 6 and they were managing, and I mean, it was only possible because of the support they got from the community and their parents. So that is the, I mean, how you've been mentioning about community support.
And also the story of the other school, Sahil, where the teachers, the students were themselves holding the teachers.
Yes.
And that really helped to stop. You forgot that
Yes,
incident.
yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, this story also, ma'am, where, ma'am, the teachers, ma'am, usually these are like tribal areas where teachers are being, they're outsourced, ma'am, to carry on the classes. So what happens is that they don't want to continue the classes because when they're expressing, they don't know the local language. That becomes a big barrier. So what they used to do was, they used to just let the class happen. I mean, no learning used to happen. The students used to come and, but what happened was there are two students who got after the teacher's life. I mean, they wanted the teachers to come and take the classes. I mean, they used to. So when a lot of times I saw that when the teachers used to just shoot, I mean, just tell them no that today there's no class and just get out and just sue them, ma'am. But then slowly they got the whole class together and that spread to like different sections also. So just because of two students, ma'am, learning started to take place in that school.
My God, Sahil, you should write these blogs. I don't know, Mashmi, if he's
Uh,
active.
he yeah, we have been writing. This is very interesting that the eagerness and interest of two students, they literally pursued the and this was something which we talk about teacher motivation, right? Often it flags. So how the student was able, two students were able to mobilize the entire class to literally pursue the teacher, eventually helping to really raise the teacher's motivation. And because of that one, what happened in one class, in that school, the teachers in other classes also slowly started, and now they have regular classes in that particular school, and was totally led by leadership of two particular students. And Sahil has actually spent and because of the lockdown, he got even stuck for another 6 months almost. So he spent almost a year in the field in several of these schools. So it was very interesting. Some of this. So what you are saying, absolutely, there's no doubt about the fact that community ownership and coming, whether it is students or parents or the village, the community, that really is responsible. And one of the big reasons why our government schools and all these institutions, they perform so bad. I think there was a study a few years ago, I think by an American university only, that it's quite an irony that public accountability is lowest in public institutions in India. And that's because the community is not involved, and most of the well-off parents and better educated parents who really hold their schools and education system and teachers and systems and organizations accountable, they have literally opted out of the public system. So the public accountability aspect in the public system has gone down literally, and because there is no community ownership and there is no voice from the community for accountability.
Right. Completely agree, Mashmi.
I also would like to bring one example, if I may.
Yes, please go ahead.
It was a couple of years ago. It was on the international news. I think I was watching this on Al Jazeera, and it was about Delhi. One man, I think he was a teacher by profession. So during the daytime, he was performing his regular duties officially. But then in the evening, he created a kind of makeshift classroom under the bridge, under one of the bridges in Delhi.
Right.
And he was teaching homeless children.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that was really kind of resemblance of classroom. but I understood that he was trying his best to do something for these marginalized segments of the society.
True. I remember that, Tatiana. I think it was quite a story that, things are, so many things are possible, but I have a different take on it. I feel that that's amazing. But, I feel that we don't have to be a hero like that person. That person was truly remarkable because he was able to go and do this, under a bridge. I feel that in our own communities, we can do this. Even in my community, there's no basic functional literacy, numeracy problem in my community, but there's something to do, right? In my own community in New Jersey, I feel that this environmental education is not really being focused on. So I feel that we can, whatever little I can do, we can continue to do educate people, get ideas from people. But yes, I think that story was completely remarkable. I think he is a police person or something, and he in the evening he would go back to this place and would sit under this in and imagine the heat in Delhi and all the
Mm.
other things going on. It was just such a remarkable story, and I get inspiration from all of these stories. But I feel that every one of us can do something in our own communities to promote educational outcomes. So thanks, Tatiana, for bringing that story up.
Well, we are almost towards the end of the allotted time that we had. Anybody else would like to make one last comment or one last question? Thought? Would like to share any last thoughts with Radhika? Yes, Sandal, go ahead.
Ma'am, during lockdown, so I thought of, taking this initiative to only teach the kids from my home, because, the parents were juggling to, provide them the basic education because they're not educated that much. Plus, they are all belong to different classes, like some are from like fourth standard, fifth standard, like preschool, nursery, and also some like eighth standard, ninth standard. And there used to be a cook, whom she used to bring her daughter at home, where, and all these kids at my home, they are studying in a private school, and the cook's daughter, she used to come from a public school, like
Common school.
yeah, girls public, yeah, girls public school. So the of course the both the education system was completely different. Girls the cook's daughter used to be from a Hindi medium school, and all these private schools, students are from English medium schools. And I would used to struggle because I'm not a trained teacher. I was struggling, how should I just go about it, like what should I teach them, how should I go about them, because when I am teaching them, I'm explaining the practicalities, like you do not have to learn these die hard, like you need to understand, create your own answers, innovate yourself into thinking various things on current issues. Like I would ask a ninth standard kid to write up his thought on a piece of paper, like a journal, like what does he think. And it would create a gap, of course, between a student from a private school and a student from a public school, because the cook's daughter, she was in ninth grade, and the kid from my home, one of the kid from my home, he was also in ninth grade. So I could see the difference between both the education system. So when Professor Radhika, she explained that there's always a college graduate in a community, and that person should take an individual responsibility of a particular community. But what about the trainings, and what about the gaps in all these institution, like public, private, of course, and also community centers that they're all actually studying, madrasas. So that's my question, how do we deal with that?
Yeah.
The complexity of the different education systems and boards and all these things in the larger Indian context is mind blowing, no doubt.
Complexity as well as the needs. I think those needs will continue to grow. And if we are at a policy level, advisor, maybe we can have a say in something and, do other things there. But of course, the need is limitless. But what we, again, going back to what we can do, we should do like you are teaching those kids. I think they are it's very helpful. At least they are getting something, because those larger policy issues will always remain. I don't think we will have a perfect education system that will continue, doing other things irrespective of the country that we are in. Even in the US, we have seen so many challenges. Even in everywhere, I think there are so many challenges that will remain. Those issues, of course, there are much research, and there are a lot of other education institutes